According to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, about 40 million people in the U.S. suffer from chronic, long-term sleep disorders each year, and an additional 20 million people experience occasional sleep problems. Why do I bring this up? Well, the answer is simple. Many people have sleep problems here in the U.S., but none quite as weird or strange as the lady in the story that you're about to hear. I'm Joseph Jordan. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Scary, Strange, and Outright Odd Show. The story I'm going to be reading today is called Chocolate is Rocket Fuel for Nightmares by the Cold People, brought to you via Reddit. My wife, Faye, has an undiagnosed sleep disorder. I knew about it long before the events up on Pikes Peak. When we first started dating, she recounted a few of her memories of sleepwalking at a young age, and one of them always sticks out in my mind. When she was a child, she climbed out of bed, crawled across the floor, growling like a rabid dog, and hid in the darkness while her older sister watched late-night TV. Faye watched her for several minutes, fixated on her sister's throat, then suddenly came to. She could not explain why she'd felt compelled to do that. As a fan of all things horror, Faye's sleep disturbances fascinated me. Early in our relationship, it did not occur to me that she suffered from night terrors until I began sleeping over at her house. Night terrors are different from nightmares. They are prolonged, intense hallucinations that persist even after the person's eyes are open. The fantasy does not end upon awakening. Instead, it pours into reality. This phenomena occur at a different level of sleep from the one that produces bad dreams. Each night is a new adventure when my wife and I go to bed. Typically, the strange behavior occurs when she's under extreme stress from her job, or when she's jet-lagged. Sometimes, it happens when we're staying in a new place, like a relative's house or in a hotel. Any sudden changes of her life can trigger one of these incidences. But chocolate seems to compound the issue dramatically. The first time I noticed this was on Halloween in our senior year of college. We munched on some leftover candy from a party we had thrown. Then we went to bed. In the middle of the night, Faye sat up slowly, ran her fingers across my cheek, and said, "I want to wear this." She started laughing, then slumped over snoring. Another time, I woke up to Faye holding a hand straight up in the air, snapped her fingers over and over. "Babe," I asked, "what are you doing?" She shushed me and motioned down toward the door. "There's a snake under there," she whispered. "Huge, all coiled up in the bed frame, and it's got a human head." There was one occasion that really scared me. A week straight, Faye would wake up and ask me if I could hear a child singing in the corner. I always told her no, but she persisted in her belief that there was a little kid somewhere in our house, singing about teddy bears. Faye's night terrors started to become far more acute about a month after she and I had moved in together. And of course, chocolate was the catalyst. It was October. My birthday is on the 30th, so most people have come to associate it with Halloween. Because of this, I always receive a windfall of chocolate chip cookies and candy as a gift, and the stockpile usually lasts several weeks. Faye and I would munch on the mountains of home-baked cookies and candy bars with reckless abandon, disregarding its propensity to make her into a midnight psychopath. After a few nights of gorging, Faye began to talk in her sleep. This wasn't unusual. She did it from time to time, but normally it's just babble about work or giggling. However, on this night, she said something about a man. "Go away," she mumbled, slowly moving her head back and forth on the pillow. I was awake as usual, writing beside her on my laptop. I reached over and stroked her back until she fell into a deeper slumber. But about an hour later, just after I had dozed off, she called out into the dark, "Leave us alone." As far as my fiance's night terrors go, there are a few omens that a serious episode is approaching. One of them is clearly enunciated words. If she's talking like she's awake, it's bad. If she's actively addressing someone, it's worse. And if, God forbid, she gets upset, there's gonna be a hurricane. I snuggled up against her and said, "Everything's alright, sweetie. Go back to bed." She exhaled sharply, eyes still closed, and responded, "I don't like him." The next morning, as we ate breakfast, I asked my fiancée if she remembered what she had dreamed about. She couldn't recall, so I dismissed the event and didn't bring it up again. It's better not to prod Faye about her sleep disturbances in detail, because she occasionally gets embarrassed. It also runs the risk of causing more of them. So, I went about the day without saying anything else, and hid the cookies in the back of the pantry. I had to deliver a lecture early the next morning, so I needed a good night's rest. That evening, we went to bed early. Faye watched a rom-com on her computer while I graded a few papers, and by the time I came back from brushing my teeth, she was fast asleep. As I leaned over her to turn off the light, I saw a Snickers wrapper on the floor below. "Damn it, Faye," I said, rolling my eyes. I turned over and went to sleep. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to her talking. "Why?" she said. After a string of words I was too groggy to make out. I rolled over to see her sitting straight up, strawberry locks cascading down her bare back. She stared past the foot of the bed. "Faye, shh," she hissed. "Can you hear it?" "Honey," I said, "go to sleep. I really need to get some rest." I gazed up into her eyes and saw that they were closed. She looked down at me, right in my face, and said, "Tell the man in the bathroom he can't come around anymore." The hair stood up on my arms. Faye always said stuff like this, but it still creeped me out. I looked across the darkness to our bathroom. The light was on inside, barely lighting up the edges of the door. Faye was an expert sleepwalker, so I reasoned that she had gotten up to use the bathroom, forgot to turn off the light, and then dreamed that someone was in there. I gently laid her back down, then shambled to the bathroom. The light stung my eyes as I pushed the door open. Of course, there was no one inside. I flicked the light off and stood there in the dark for a moment, rubbing my tired eyes, then went back to bed. "Is he gone?" she muttered, falling back to sleep. "Yeah, babe, took care of him." I dragged myself through the next day. I struggled to fall back asleep after the bathroom ordeal, so when I got home, I expressed to Faye that I was upset for her eating candy in bed. She had just returned from the gym, and her petite figure was wrapped in curve-hugging spandex. "Do I look like I need to watch what I eat?" She laughed, leaning against the kitchen counter and stirring a protein shake. "That's not what I mean, and you know it," I said. "You've been keeping me awake. I'm just asking you to cut the chocolate for a few days." Faye walked over and threw her arms around me. "I will, Pop-Tart," she said with a big smile, "as soon as we run out." Things got a lot worse that night. I hid the candy with the cookies and searched our bedroom for a hidden stash. I found nothing. "I haven't had anything," she said flatly. She crawled under the sheets and buried her head in the pillows. I shut off the lights, closed the door, and joined her. As I climbed into bed, I glanced out of the window. It was starting to rain. I don't know how long I slept. At some point, I jerked from a dead slumber to hear Faye shouting in the dark, "Stay out of there!" She was sitting halfway out of bed, feet on the floor, staring at the door that leads into the hallway. My protective instinct surged, so I got out of bed and investigated the hall. Nothing. Faye murmured behind me. "What?" I asked. "The man in the hall. He's ruining my wallpaper. Spreading filth." "Okay," I said, closing the door and walking back to the bed. I was exhausted and getting sick of this, but I always tried to be patient with her. "Get out!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. I shook her awake. "Faye," I snapped, "keep it down. You're going to wake up the damn neighbors." She came and looked around with tired eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, confusion in her voice. "No more chocolate," I replied. I got into bed and yanked the sheets up over my head. The last thing I heard was, "I'm not a fucking child, Felix. Don't treat me like one." Faye was already gone when I woke up. It was my day off, so I napped half the day and intermittently caught up on my grading. When she finally got home, we had dinner together. She accepted my apology for parenting her and acknowledged that she had been inconsiderate about my lack of sleep. When 10 p.m. rolled around, Faye passed right out, but I didn't even feel tired. Instead, I stayed up writing, but this time I did it downstairs on the couch, so not as to provoke any dreams. Any noise made while Faye was asleep could potentially lead to a night terror. Rain splashing against the window could conjure up a creature tapping on the glass. A movie playing on my computer could manifest people inside the room. I'd become a ninja each time she went to bed. I sat there on the couch, wrapped up in a blanket, sipping on honey tea and revising a draft of a story. The little lamp next to me was just bright enough to cast eerie shadows all over the far end of the house. At about midnight, I heard a noise upstairs. It sounded like muffled footsteps. Someone was walking across the long throw rug in the hall. I quietly headed up there, intending to stop Faye from sleepwalking right off the staircase. But when I got to the top of the stairs, no one was there. The door to our bedroom was closed. I crept toward it and peeked inside. The bed was empty. "Faye?" I called out, flipping on the light. She was standing by the bathroom door, lifting up one of the large framed photos that hung on the wall. It was a picture of a stream. Another frame laid on the floor nearby. "There's windows behind these," she said, voice trembling with fear. "That's how he got in." I rushed over, worried that the frame would fall on her head and shatter. I gently pulled her away from it and led her back to the bed and tucked her in. "There's no one here, sweetheart," I said, rubbing her back in a vain attempt to get her to go back to sleep. "Just me." "Not here," she replied, face half buried in the pillow. "He went downstairs." Just as she finished the sentence, there came a thud from far off in the house, as if someone had bumped into a wall in the dark. I turned and looked over my shoulder at the door. It was closed. I thought I'd left it open when I came in. I left the room, then turned on the hallway light and stood at the top of the stairs, listening. Rain battered the house, and nothing else made a sound. Maybe a tree branch fell in the house, I thought. After all, the storm was getting worse. The lights were off downstairs, including the lamp I'd kept on while writing. Only my laptop glowed on the sofa now. "Is someone here?" I called out, trying to keep my voice down. Only the rain replied. I made my way through the entire bottom floor, flopping on each light and looking around. As I entered the kitchen, I found an empty thermos with chocolate stains inside. It was Faye's protein shake. For God's sakes, I mumbled. I turned off the kitchen light and grabbed my laptop, then went upstairs to bed. I felt like an idiot for playing into my fiance's dreams. Sleep came quickly, but nightmares came with it. The same one, over and over. There was a man in our house, standing at the bottom of the stairs, withered in the shadows. He didn't feel like a person, but more like a husk, a thing imitating a human. He was no doubt the consequence of listening to Faye's sleep talk over the past few nights, but he scared me to death, and the dreams woke me up all night long. I was an exhausted wreck the following morning. I called out sick from work and once again stayed in the bed, intermittently seeing the shadowy figure in my dreams. Faye called to check on me twice and told me that she would come home early to make me soup and grilled cheese, my favorite at-home sick meal. Secretly, I wish she'd stayed at work late. In fact, I wish I could spend the night somewhere away from her. That night, Faye was kind enough to offer me to sleep on the couch. I reluctantly obliged, knowing that I'd be in serious trouble if I missed another day of work. We took extra blankets out of the closet and got her all set up. Then, she came upstairs to tuck me in. "I'm sorry about all this," she said, kissing my forehead as I lay in bed. "I don't understand why I'm like this. You should find a less creepy girl." She smiled. Then I smiled. "It's not all bad," I replied, pointing at the framed artwork from my first book. "You're pretty good inspiration." "Okay, Pop-Tart," she said as she left the room, closing the door behind her. The rain pounded rhythmically against the window, lulling me to sleep. I hadn't stopped all week. It only took a few minutes for me to drift off. The shadowy man appeared again in my dreams. This time, he stood at the top of the stairs, looking down the hall at our bedroom. He called out my name. I jolted awake, nearly leaping straight up into the air. I opened my eyes to see the ceiling, dimly glowing in the moonlight. The raindrops running down the window cast their silhouettes upon the surface, making it wriggle and wither. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. The second I looked down, my heart knotted up in my chest. A lightning bolt of fear zapped through every nerve in my body. He was there, at the edge of my bed, holding tightly onto my foot through the blankets. I screamed in terror and pulled my legs up to my body, covering in a ball against the headboard. "Who are you?" I yelped. I reached over and yanked the pull chain on the lamp beside me. Light flooded the room, revealing Faye, standing there with her eyes rolled back in her head. She was sleepwalking. "Faye!" I shouted. "You scared the f—" She silenced me with her hand and put her fingers to her lips. As she did, the unmistakable sound of someone moving around downstairs met my ears. The bedroom door was open, so I could hear it clearly. A long, scraping sound, like a hand dragging on a wall. A thud! A chair sliding on the wood floor. "He's here," Faye whispered, repetitively clawing a circle on the bed. I got out of bed, stood there next to her, straining to hear more. The door creaked open. Another thud. Slow, uneven footsteps on the carpet. "Who is he, Faye?" I whispered. She didn't respond. "Faye, where is he?" She turned her head slightly. Only the whites of her eyes were showing. She slowly pointed downward. "Basement." I leapt out of bed and stormed down the hallway in my boxers, ready to maul anybody I found in my house. As I jogged down the stairs, something caught my eye. Someone was sitting at the dinner table, sitting in the dark. Terror iced over my hands, compelling them to shake as I reached for the light switch at the bottom of the staircase. The chandelier flashed on above the table, revealing 4 empty chairs, one of them slightly out of place. "Who's in here?" I shouted. The sound of bones crackling beneath skin echoed through the dining room. It came from the short hall that led to the basement. The image of a man shuffling around my house, popping his knuckles, neck, aroused in my house. Maybe he was some drug friend looking for pills. I grabbed the ancient flashlight from the kitchen, then made my way to the basement floor. It was slightly open. Faye and I always kept it closed to block the cold drafts that might otherwise pour in from the uninsulated basement. I poked my head outside and peered down the stairs. There, at the bottom, was a face looking back up at me. It was so withered in darkness, it appeared disembodied. I couldn't discern any of its features, only an outline, but it seemed to be looking right at me. I shook so hard that the batteries of the flashlight audibly clattered. Without taking my eyes off the face, I reached over and pulled the light string, but it would not turn on. The stale air went even colder. The face retreated into darkness, and again, the sickly sound of bones popping echoed all around me. I turned on the flashlight and directed its beam down the wooden stairs. Its pathetic glow barely reached the bottom. I hadn't changed the batteries in a decade. The tiny circle of light illuminated only a few boxes and a broken vacuum. I slowly walked down the stairs. They moaned under my feet, joining the symphony of disturbing noises that emanated from the dark. I reached the cold cement and rounded the corner, scouring the walls with my flashlight. A box fell to the floor. I whipped the light towards the sound, and there he was. A man, facing away from me, hunched over and sliding his hands across the concrete wall. He was feeling his way around. As the light moved over him, that terrible dread from my nightmare once again took hold. I was overcome with the sense that it was not a person at all. His skin was gray and pallid, and his bones poked against it as if trying to escape. He looked like a skeleton draped in rotten ham. Big, festering sores poked his back arms. He was naked. "Who?" The words bubbled up from my throat and dribbled off my lips. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man turned his ear toward me, listening for my voice. "I'm lost," he whimpered. His voice was impossibly raspy. There was not a drop of spit in his mouth. "Help me." He turned his bald head in my direction. The skin on his face was taut and dry, clinging to a pair of sharp cheekbones, where his eyes should have been. Black devoids yawned. A frantic scream came rushing out of my mouth. I stumbled backwards, falling onto a pile of boxes, dropped the flashlight. It rolled away. The room went pitch black. "I'm in the dark," he said, shuffling towards me. I could hear him bumping into all the clutter. "I'm lost," he cried, rage building in his voice. "Give them back." "Leave us alone," I shouted back. I tried desperately to hoist myself off of the boxes, but the man fell on top of me and grabbed me by the throat with his hands as cold as death. His face pressed against mine. His waxy lips brushed my ear. "Give them back," he whispered. In a burst of panic-induced strength, I threw him off of me and scrambled up the stairs. As I reached the top, I yanked the pull string one more time. The blinding light flooded the basement. I waited there, listening, but no more sounds of movement came from below. Against every instinct in my body, I descended a few steps and peeked into the room again. The man was gone. I raced out of the basement and slammed the door shut. Terror compelled me as I made my way upstairs. Every shadow in the house seemed to come alive around me. The horrible man could be standing in any of them, waiting to reach out and pull me in. The light was off in our bedroom, and when I pushed the door open, I was shocked to find Faye sleeping soundly in a pool of pale moonlight. The storm had lulled, leaving the house eerily silent. The blankets on her chest rose and fell. Her breathing was soft and slow. "Faye," I said, taking a seat on the bed and shaking her. She grunted. "Faye," I repeated. "Who's the man?" "The what?" she asked in a sleepy voice. "The man in our house." She replied, her eyes still closed. "He watches you sleep. Stands right there. Every night." She pointed a lazy hand at the ground next to the bed. "So I took them. I don't like when he watches." "Took what, Faye? What did you take?" She yawned and rolled over. "His eyes." Wow, that's some pretty heavy stuff. You know, I like chocolate, but I think that if I had sleeping problems like that, I'd still eat a lot of chocolate. What'd you guys think? Let me know. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Scary, Strange, and Outright Odd Show.